So good afternoon, everyone. Just to do some introductions to start off, I'm Andrew Davis. I'm the Service Manager for Safeguarding Adults for Westmoreland and Furness Local Authority, and I'm here with my colleague Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Joyce. I'm the Service Manager for the Safeguarding Adults Service in Cumberland Local Authority.
And we're here today to talk you through the Transitional Safeguarding Pathway. And this is in partnership with Cumbria Safeguarding Adults Board and Cumbria Safeguarding Children Partnership. This is an internal pathway that's used between children's services and adult services. And when we say launch this pathway, probably been in place for about 12 months now. And so this session really is around that, sort of making sort of the wider sort of partnership aware of this process. So would you mind going on to the next slide, please? So in terms of setting the scene and where the pathway came from, it came out of the CSAB. So I'm just going to talk you through and just give you a little bit of context to the pathway. So in 2021, Cumbria Safeguarding Adults Board commissioned a Safeguarding Adults review into the death of Kate. Kate was a young white British woman who died in 2020, aged 18. Services had been involved with Kate and her family since 2018, when it was identified that she was at risk of child exploitation. Kate was open to children's services until her 18th birthday. On reaching 18 years of age, Kate didn't receive ongoing support from adult services, as she was deemed to have no care and support needs under the Care Act 2014. However, drug and alcohol services, the youth offending team, and leaving care services remained involved with her. Unfortunately, Kate's situation, including her vulnerability, didn't improve, and she sadly died as a result of a drugs overdose in 2020. Kate had been on the waiting list for a mental health assessment at the time of her death, and adult social care had commenced a Care Act assessment in the days leading up to her death. The SAR that was published highlighted system learning, generating 11 recommendations. Following publication of this learning, a task and finish group was established to consider and address some of the learning and recommendations. So I'm going to talk you through the system learning points from that SAR. So the first system learning was transition planning for young people at risk of exploitation, partnership and governance arrangements. So planning for Kate's transition began too late, resulting in a lack of engagement with adult services. There was a need for further develop and embed transitions arrangements across all agencies for identifying the future support needs of children and young people at continuing risk of exploitation once they reach the age of 18 years old. The Adults and Children Safeguarding Partnership should therefore consider whether to develop a cross-age group to better coordinate and strengthen the arrangements for oversight and governance of exploitation when young people are moving into adult services. So therefore, that gap was identified from the review, that people reaching the age of 18, so it was something to help support bridge that gap. System Learning 2 was the response to young adults victims of exploitation. So when referrals were made to adult social care, the outcome following application of the Care Act was that safeguarding response was not required. The SAR identified several areas to strengthen the response to young adults at risk of exploitation. So a more fluid approach should be developed in respect of safeguarding responses to young adults that recognise their developmental needs. A process should be developed for supporting adults at risk of exploitation who do not meet the criteria for safeguarding adults under Section 42, and when those inquiries are to be initiated. So the Care Act 2014 states that when someone is 18 or over but still receiving children's services and a safeguarding issue is raised, the matter should be dealt with by adult services, even if the young adult doesn't have eligible needs for care and support. And that also an escalation process for high-risk cases by Cumbria Safeguarding Adults Board should be considered. So Cumbria Safeguarding Adults Board and Cumbria Safeguarding Children Partnership to consider an expansion of the CRR Level 2 meetings to allow consideration of cases involving adults at risk of exploitation. The next part Sarah is going to talk you through, and this is the pathway that we have developed.
Thanks, Andrew, and thank you, Helen, for the next slide. So in response to the system, identified system learning, adult social care now attend the MACE meetings, so the multi-agency child exploitation meetings. And this provides opportunity for support and advice, for early awareness of future referrals that are coming through, and for sharing updates on ongoing work with individuals within that process. So the referral, which generally comes from the complex safeguarding team or the care experience team within children's services, we expect the referral to come through when a child is 17.5 years old and has an ongoing child exploitation pathway. So the referral should be made via the single point of access with supporting documentation which clearly highlights the child exploitation concerns and associated risks. And on those following points, that's just to demonstrate that there are two different single points of access, whether that's in Cumberland and in Westmoreland and Furness. Thanks, Helen. So following receipt of the referral, the duty safeguarding adults practitioner will then progress the safeguarding concern for allocation and information gathering. So that will be within the inquiry process, and the details of the allocated practitioner will be communicated to the complex safeguarding team. So that's back to the referrer to ensure transparency and support information sharing. Thanks, Helen. So the complex safeguarding team will then invite the allocated practitioner, who will be from the Safeguarding Adult Service and the Advanced Practice Lead, to the next child exploitation review. Thanks, Helen. So the meeting itself, so this will provide an opportunity to ensure a comprehensive discussion around child exploitation takes place, and then will inform the decision as to whether the young person should transfer to adult services or a safeguarding inquiry it should be undertaken. And for both of those points, they're not mutually exclusive, so it can be both at the same time. So where there is disagreement between children's services and adult social care in relation to the transition process, the young person, for the young person, then there is an escalation policy through CSAB and CSCP, which should be used. Thanks, Helen. So this slide is just a flow chart of what you'll see on the CSCP website. So it just takes you through the various points of referral and what to expect, and that can be found under the child exploitation heading. So I'm just going to hand back to you, Andrew, now for next steps in terms of review. Thanks.
Thank you. So next steps in terms of the pathway, as I said, we've probably been using this pathway for about a year. We're at a point now where we're looking at sort of developing a joint audit tool between children's and adult services. The pathway is further embedded, and we're looking at further sort of developments around that pathway. One of the things that we're looking at in Westmoreland and Furness is potentially producing a sort of a safeguarding transitional plan. And that's basically a plan that addresses the risks, but also highlights the professionals who are involved, which is key in terms of professionals involved, but also over the individual, so they know who everyone is and what their role is. We've also identified from the publication of Sardonna that there's possibly other further learning to be involved and further review. At this point, I think my colleague Amanda from the complex safeguarding team is hopefully on the call to be able to give some signpost into some further training that people might want to access through the CSCP website.
How many cases have you had so far?
Oh, that's quite a difficult one to say off the top of my head, but from a Westmoreland perspective, we've probably had about a dozen cases through. So the agreement is that when the referral comes through to ourselves, we will progress the safeguarding to a Section 42 inquiry, and therefore we'll engage with that process up until the age of the person reaching 18, and then we'll have a plan in terms of sort of how things move into adult services. And as Sarah said, that could be through the sort of a Care Act route. But that also could be staying within that safeguarding process. I think the key thing for it is that were Kate to be referred now into either Westmoreland or Cumberland, there would be a process set around Kate. Those conversations would be held, and there would be a plan in place that she would be aware of.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Hiya, Philip.
Good afternoon. I was just wondering, thinking about some of the challenges from a healthcare provider point of view, where a young person is an inpatient and will potentially then transition to adult health services, whether it's mental health, physical health, whatever that is, there's that real risk that health professionals think they're doing transitional safeguarding because they're doing safeguarding at the point of transition. And I'm just wondering, thinking about in your area, is there perhaps any plans or any kind of work underway to engage with health providers, thinking about people who may only technically discharge, and that is only sometimes providers risk falling into the trap of thinking at the point of discharge who they need to communicate with instead of 6 months before someone turns 18. So how to engage with those health providers to make sure that they're aware of the pathway and that they need to be proactive at an earlier stage in that journey.
Yeah, and those are the exact conversations I was having last week with a gentleman whose name completely escapes me, and that has I'll think about it and I'll put it in the chat. But we are having those conversations for that exact reason, really. And I think there is definitely that there needs to be that link in to the pathway as well from health. So those conversations are also being had with service managers within Westmoreland and Furness for learning disabilities and mental health services as well.
Oh, that's really positive to hear. Thank you, Andrew.
Hiya, Kath.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you. I apologise to everybody. My camera's not working. I was really interested. I'm very interested in transitional safeguarding, so it's really good to be here today. Thank you. I was just wondering how you capture the voice of the young person or the adult. If it's somebody transitioning, how I think it's something that we all need to learn how to continue to do and do it better. Doesn't matter how good we are. So I'm just interested in hearing how you did that, or how you are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how we're doing that from an adult safeguarding perspective, through making safeguarding personal, it's one of the sort of values that underpins adult safeguarding practice. It's the sort of the core thing that we hold dear, really, and it has to be around that young person's sort of outcomes at the end of the day. And that's where obviously we come up against things around sort of capacity and risk and things like that. But making safeguarding personal, ensuring that young person or adult's voice shines through is the sort of core of of adult safeguarding work.
Thanks, Andrew. Could I ask another question? Be very cheeky and jump straight in. One of the areas that I'm interested in are the trans or non-binary community, alongside asylum seekers, because I think those are two areas that I don't always hear a lot of within exploitation world. And I think it's something that we need to do to be able to reach out to the trans non-binary community. And I just wondered if you'd had any experience of that community group coming through.
Yes, we have, in terms of sort of safeguarding inquiry work. We very much have, and we've worked with people as we would through a sort of a safeguarding inquiry as we would normally would through that process. But yeah, very much so. And I know as a sort of a local authority, social workers and OTs have also accessed further training as well.
Right, thank you.
It's also worth adding as well that this pathway has been cited by the Children's Society as well, and as like a sort of a bit of an exemplar, because I think this is a sort of an area of safeguarding that local authorities and various people are struggling with. I think at the moment we've got those conversations, we're developing those relationships with one another, and certainly from a Westmoreland perspective, I think it's probably the closest working relationship that we've had with children's from an adult's perspective. We know who each other are. Not very well phrased, but yeah, we know who our equivalents are. We sit in the same office as one another, and those conversations are being had all the time. So I think that sort of joint and close working relationship has really developed as a result of this pathway. And unfortunately, it's this thing with SARS that sometimes something really unpleasant, horrible has to happen for something positive to come out of it. And I really feel that this pathway has been a really positive piece of work and something we can take forward.
We have got Amanda on the call now. Thank you.
Hi, Amanda. Sorry, I hear you're having nightmares with IT.
That possibly continues. I wonder if while she's still struggling with her IT, there are a couple of questions there in the chat, Andrew, and one refers to what would happen if the young person doesn't consent to the referral into adult safeguarding at 17 and a half.
In terms of safeguarding and consent, we would override that consent because of the exploitation concerns, because of the risks involved, and we would work with that young person, adult, around sort of engaging with them. And it's something within an adult's perspective that we do positively engage with people on a sort of a daily basis. It's about developing that relationship and trust.
That's great. Thank you for that clarification. And what should happen if the young person was living out of county?
So if the person's living out of county, adult safeguarding is if the exploitation is happening out of county, the safeguarding would be dealt with the county that the person's residing in. That's how it works in adults. Obviously, if there was a plan for them to move back into Westmoreland or Cumberland, then a plan would be put in place in terms of that move and what that person needs to be able to be supported when they come back.
That's great. Thanks for that clarification. And then there's just one final question there in the chat. If the young person was still at college or sixth form when they turn 18, would the school be informed of the process or involved?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, very much so. They'd be absolutely actively involved in the safeguarding strategy meetings or for the child exploitation reviews.
That's lovely. Thank you. That's all the questions in the chat, Andrew. And thank you very much, Andrew and Sarah. It's been a really useful session and an opportunity for us to formally launch this procedure that we know has been obviously in place now for at least a year, and obviously during that time you've had opportunity to review that and ensure it's working and take a number of cases through that process. I should just add that it is only kind of one of the small parts of the learning and responses that the as a partnership, as a safeguarding partnership, we have taken in response to the learning from the CSAB. It is one of the kind of work streams and strands of action, but certainly, as Andrew outlined earlier, we will be taking an opportunity in collaboration with our children's partnership colleagues to undertake an audit so that we can be ensured that this is embedded as a process and is being applied. And obviously, you know, as Andrew referred to, we have just recently also published the Donna SAR, so it will be useful assurance in response to that as well.
Just because Amanda wasn't able to join the call today, I'll do my best to direct people.
I am here.
I'm
here
you're
now,
here.
Andrew.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, I'm on my phone because I'm still having laptop issues. But if and I know Belinda's on from Cumberland as well. I can see Belinda on the screen. But I will just put in the just check if it's in the chat. But I can share in the chat the exploitation pathway where you get all the information from the CSCP and the training as well. So if people would like to access training for child exploitation, there is a level 1 training online through the CSCP, and then there's also the level 2 in-person training, which both myself and Belinda run along with our police colleagues. The next one is in January, and that's in Barrow March out west. I think it is, Belinda, I can't remember if it's Whitehaven or Workington. I know Belinda's doing that one.
Yeah, I think the 10th of March or 11th of March, it's Workington.
That's brilliant. All right.
And then just to sort of share, I know I didn't hear everything, but if children are on a child exploitation pathway, you would be guided in putting in those referrals to adult services as well along that time, and would be saying when they needed to go in, and we would invite adult services along to the child exploitation meetings as well. So there is a joined up approach to that. And then longer term, I think, Andrew, as well, within the local authorities, we'll be looking at how we can develop that even further around exploitation post 18. So that's where that's up to. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks both, and that's really useful. And I've just put a note in the chat to say, following today's session, what we'll do to everybody who's in attendance is we'll share the slides, all of those useful links which I've put in the chat today. And also, if Amanda and Belinda, if you could share the link to the training sessions, people can then obviously access that and book that on, so we can send that out following today's session.